Okay, welcome everyone to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into a really fascinating stack of sources.
We are. It's mainly this incredibly detailed genealogical document.
Right, tracing a single family line over, what, more than 1,000 years?
Yeah, all the way from the 8th century in Europe right up to modern America. It's quite the journey.
And we've got supplementary historical notes too, right?
Yeah,
To sort of flesh out the key figures.
exactly. So our mission really is to unpack this massive family history. We want to highlight, the most surprising connections, things you might never guess.
And get a feel for the major historical moments these people actually lived through.
Live through and often shaped, yeah. It's not just witnessing history.
So think of this as like a unique shortcut. Through centuries of kings, queens, battles.
Transatlantic journeys, the works, all seen through this one family's story.
And it starts with someone huge, almost legendary.
Oh, absolutely. We kick off this deep dive at Generation 1 with Charlemagne, Charles the Great.
Born around 742, died 814. King of the Franks, Emperor of the West. Foundational.
Totally. He wasn't just a ruler. He was, consolidating power, expanding.
What really jumps out from the sources about that consolidation, it feels relentless.
Well, the scale of it is just staggering. He conquers Italy, becomes king of the Lombards, pushes the Moors back in Spain, annexes Bavaria.
On the Saxons, that decades-long struggle to subjugate and Christianize them.
Right. But the moment the source really flags as pivotal is his coronation.
Christmas Day, 800, by Pope Leo III.
Yeah, and this wasn't just symbolic. It effectively revives the Western Roman Empire idea, lays the groundwork for the Holy Roman Empire.
And really finalizes that split with Byzantium, the Eastern Empire.
He completely reshaped Europe's political map and its religious landscape, too.
And it wasn't just conquest. The sources talk about his administration, law codes.
Yeah, efficient system, codifying laws, and that famous burst of learning and art at Aachen, the Carolingian Renaissance.
Although the end of his reign, things got a bit rocky. Those Northman raids started picking up.
They did, trouble brewing, and then his son, Louis I, took over.
Louis I, Generation 2, Louis the Pious. His reign seems, well, complicated, dominated by family fights, according to the sources.
It really was. He tried to carve out a kingdom for his son Charles from his second marriage, and
His older sons weren't having it.
Not at all. Sparked revolts, and eventually the empire gets partitioned, undoing much of what his father built.
And that directly affects the son he tried to favor, right?
Yeah.
Charles II, Charles the Bald, Generation 3.
Exactly. He ends up with the western part, roughly modern France, after the 843 treaty.
But his reign wasn't easy either. Rising nobles, those Norsemen still causing trouble.
Yeah, constant challenges. You can really see the Carolingian Empire starting to fragment here. The seeds of nations like France are being sown, but under, intense pressure.
Okay, so we had this powerful but fragmenting Carolingian line. How does it connect down our specific family thread?
Right. The key link is Princess Judith, Generation 4. She's Charles the Bald's daughter.
Ah, okay. And she marries Baldwin I. Her father makes him Margrave of Flanders. That sounds important.
No, it's hugely strategic. Margrave means basically count of a border region.
Ah.
And the source is clear. Baldwin got Flanders specifically because it was on the front lines. The coastal areas were getting hammered by Northman raids.
So put your tough son-in-law in charge of the dangerous bit. Makes sense.
Exactly. Defend the kingdom's edge.
So Flanders becomes the new base. And the line continues through the Counts of Flanders.
Yes, Baldwin II, Generation 5, he really strengthens things. And talk about a power move, he marries Elstrude.
Daughter of Alfred the Great, King of England.
The very one. That's a massive cross-kingdom connection right there. Links Flanders right into the English royal house.
Wow, okay, then the line keeps going. Arnulf I, Gen 6.
He marries royalty too, right?
Yep, Alex of Vermandois, who also traces back to French royalty. And it continues. Baldwin III, Gen 7. Ardulf Roland II, Gen 8, and Arnulf II's wife. She also traces back to Charlemagne, through a different line.
Isn't that fascinating? It shows just how interconnected these families were, like a web.
Totally. Then Baldwin IV, Gen 9, and Baldwin V, Gen 10.
And Baldwin V doubles down on the French connection, marrying Princess Adele, daughter of the King of France.
So all these strategic marriages are building power, influence,
weaving this network across Western Europe.
And it all leads us to someone absolutely central to English history.
Couldn't be more central. Matilda of Flanders, Generation 11.
And her marriage to William, Duke of Normandy, later the Conqueror, King of England.
William I. But as the sources point out, it wasn't a simple match.
No, Matilda's lineage was incredible French, English, German, Norman blood, but her dad wasn't keen on William.
Well, William was illegitimate. His claim to Normandy was, let's say, contested, and they were cousins.
Which the church really didn't like. They got excommunicated.
They did. But they managed to reconcile with the Pope. There were conditions, though.
Ah, the abbeys. Each had to build one as penance.
Exactly. William built St. Stephen's for monks, Matilda the Abbey aux Dames for nuns, both in Caen. You can still see them today. It's like physical proof of that whole episode.
That's incredible. And Matilda herself, crowned queen in England. The source calls her the first real queen.
Yeah, holding a significant position. Her death apparently hit William hard. He even gave up hunting, the source says.
And William himself, generation 11, obviously pivotal, Duke in 1035, then Hastings in 1066.
Changed England forever. The Norman conquest.
The sources list it all. Coronation, castle building, crushing rebellions. Basically done by 1072.
Redistributing land to his Norman followers, changing the whole aristocracy, and commissioning that incredible survey.
A doomsday book, 1085-86. Unprecedented.
Shows the level of control they establish. He's seen as, one of England's most impactful kings.
So from William and Matilda, the line goes straight into the heart of the English monarchy they founded.
Correct. Through their son, Henry the Deux, generation 12, known as Beauclerc, the scholar.
Henry I sounds like he grabbed his chance in 1100, seized the throne, while his older brother Robert was away on crusade.
Oh, a bit opportunistic, yeah.
Yeah.
Then he had to fend off Robert's invasion, eventually beat him in Normandy, took the dukedom too.
His reign also had that big fight with the church, right, over who appoints bishops, lay investiture.
Huge power struggle for the time, king versus pope. His later years were focused on getting his daughter Matilda recognized as heir.
But overall, his reign is seen as bringing order, strengthening royal justice after the chaos.
Generally, yes. And his wife, Matilda of Scotland, also Gen 12. She sounds amazing.
Good Queen Maud, loved by the people, and crucially for our line, she was descended from Alfred the Great too.
Yes. So she reconnects the Norman line back to the earlier Anglo-Saxon royalty. Double Alfred connection now.
The source mentions some confusion about her burial place, a little historical mystery.
Yeah, multiple memorials. Adds a bit of intrigue.
And their daughter, Princess Matilda, Gen 13, also called Maud, Dowager Empress of Germany first.
Then she marries Geoffrey Plantagenet, Count of Anjou. And here's another connection point.
Don't tell me. He also traces back to Charlemagne.
He does. Another strand weaving back to the founder. It reinforces how deep these roots go.
She's the one who fought her cousin Stephen for the throne, right? The Civil War period, the anarchy?
That's her. She was even elected Lady of the English for a time in 1141, but couldn't quite make it stick.
So she stepped back in favor of her son,
who becomes Henry II Plantagenet, generation 14, founder of that whole dynasty.
a really powerful king. And his marriage to Eleanor of Aquitaine, also Gen 14, that brought in huge territories in France.
Massive. Eleanor had been queen of France before. Her lands in southwest France were vast. Added to Henry's domains, it created this huge Angevin empire.
His reign sounds incredibly busy, restoring order, centralizing government, courts. But the big thing everyone remembers is
Thomas à Becket, yeah, the Archbishop of Canterbury.
the source highlights that conflict over church versus royal courts, the constitutions of Clarendon.
It escalated dramatically.
Yeah.
Led to Becket's murder in Canterbury Cathedral in 1170. Henry had to do public penance, a defining clash between church and state.
And Eleanor. What a life. Queen of two countries, mother of two kings, Richard Lionheart and John.
The sources mention her court at Poitiers, a cultural hub, but she was also a political player. Backed her sons against Henry, got herself locked up for years.
But helped Richard get the throne in the end.
She did. A formidable woman.
Which brings us to their youngest son, Jascoure,
Yeah.
Plantagenet, generation 15. The sources.
Uh,
Well, they don't paint a flattering picture.
He had a rough time. Lost a lot of French lands to Philip II of France. Major fight with Pope Innocent III over the archbishop. Got himself excommunicated.
Had to basically hand England over to the Pope as a fiefdom to get back in favor.
Yeah. But the main event, the thing with the longest legacy from his reign mentioned in the sources.
The Barons' Rebellion,
Yeah,
1215, because he was abusing his power.
exactly. Which led directly to him being forced to seal Magna Carta.
Limiting the king's power, setting out rights, foundational stuff.
Yeah.
Born from that conflict.
Absolutely. And John's second wife, Isabella of Angoulême, also Gen 15. The sources have this wild story about her later life. It's quite something. After John died, she remarried, later gets accused of plotting to poison the King of France.
No way.
Flees, dies in hiding in an abbey, asks to be buried outside in the cemetery.
But her son, Henry III, moved her inside later.
Yeah, next to his father and grandparents. Shows the crazy politics and family drama of the time.
Speaking of Henry III, Plantagenet, generation 16, John's son. King as a kid, but his adult reign. The sources call it extravagant, weak.
Yeah, lost fortunes on pointless wars in France. His favoritism towards French relatives and being too close to the papacy really annoyed the English barons.
His attempt to get the Sicilian throne for his son was the last straw. Kicked off the Barons' War.
Led by Simon de Montfort, who actually won for a bit and summoned that famous parliament in 1265.
The one with knights and burgesses, not just barons. A step towards wider representation.
Key moment. But Henry's son, Edward I, turned the tables, won the war. Henry was king in name, but Edward was effectively ruling from 1267.
Henry's wife, Eleanor of Provence, Gen 16, she wasn't popular either, seen as a foreigner.
Very unpopular, yeah, as English identity was growing. But the sources add this interesting detail. She was apparently clever, wrote poetry.
And one of her poems helped her get recommended to Henry as a bride. That's amazing.
That political match, too. Her sister was Queen of France, but yeah, not loved by the English people.
So it's really Edward I, Plantagenet, generation 17, who takes the reins properly.
Definitely. Known as the English Justinian for all his legal reforms, like the Statutes of Westminster. He conquered Wales.
But Scotland was a much tougher, longer fight.
Right, and the sources point to his model parliament in 1295, bringing in merchants, lower clergy, alongside the barons.
And here's a key point from the sources about his reign.
Yeah.
His constant need for war money.
Especially for Scotland, yeah. It actually empowered Parliament.
Because they resisted the taxes, they forced him to confirm charters, assert their right to consent. Crucial for the Commons.
It really was an unintended consequence of his wars.
Edward I's wife, Eleanor of Castile, Gen 17. Amidst all this war and politics, their relationship sounds nice.
The sources paint it that way. Arranged marriage, she was only 10, he was 15. But apparently happy.
There's that funny detail about arriving in Burgos on the exact day the astrologers pick.
Gotta love it. She had 8 kids, and when she died in 1290, Edward was devastated.
The story about the wax tapers. Arranging masses and 2 tapers to burn forever by her tomb.
And they did. For 300 years, the source says, until the Reformation. It really shows a personal depth to this formidable king.
From Edward I, we get Edward II, Plantagenet, Gen 18. And the sources are less kind, weak, self-indulgent.
Yeah, his reign was marked by infighting, losing Scotland to Robert the Bruce.
His reliance on unpopular favorites, Piers Gaveston, the Despensers, caused huge problems with the barons. Rebellion.
And then there's his wife, Queen Isabella of France, also Gen 18. What a story arc.
Isabella the Fair, initially. Then She-Wolf of France.
Wow. The sources say she was first hailed as the Liberator for helping depose Edward II and get her son, Edward III, on the throne.
But then her affair with Roger Mortimer, that led to her downfall.
Right. Though the sources add that Edward III later tried to clear her name, ordered the streets cleaned when her body was brought for burial. Some even thought she might have had periods of mental instability later on.
And here's the big historical connection. Isabella's brother, the King of France, died heirless.
Exactly. Which meant Edward III, through his mother Isabella, could claim the French throne.
And that's what kicks off the 100 Years' War in 1337.
Precisely. It dominates the reign of Edward III, Plantagenet, generation 19.
He took power in 1330, got rid of Mortimer, fought the 100 Years' War alongside his famous son,
Edward the Black Prince. Yep. The war itself wasn't decisive in Edward's lifetime, but constitutionally.
The Commons gained more power again. Needing war funds gave them leverage.
Right. They really cemented their power to consent to taxation.
His reign also saw the horror of the Black Death, decimated the population.
Led to massive social upheaval, labor shortages, demands for higher wages, big changes.
His wife was Philippa of Hainault, Gen 19. She sounds well-liked. Courteous, liberal, noble lady, a chronicler called her.
Seems so. They had many children. And the sources hint at future trouble. The descendants of their sons, Black Prince and John of Gaunt, would fight the Wars of the Roses later.
Edward III was holding her hand when she died, apparently.
So that covers this really intense period of English royalty. Now the lineage shifts a bit, moves into the nobility.
Okay, so from Edward III and Philippa, the line goes through their son Lionel of Antwerp, Plantagenet, Gen 20, Duke of Clarence.
And the sources note something striking. He was supposedly really tall, like 6'7", A Plantagenet trait, apparently.
Huh. A specific detail that sticks. His daughter, Princess Philippa, Gen 21, marries into the Mortimer family.
Edmund de Mortimer, 3rd Earl of March. Powerful family.
And their daughter, Lady Elizabeth de Mortimer, Gen 22, she marries someone famous from Shakespeare.
Sir Henry de Percy, Harry Hotspur.
Hotspur. So he was real. The sources confirm him, nobleman, son of the Earl of Northumberland, fought the Scots.
But then turned rebel, plotted with his father, Owen Glendower, the Mortimers, to overthrow King Henry IV in 1403.
Didn't end well for him. Battle of Shrewsbury.
Nope. Henry IV, Hotspur was killed. A real dramatic episode in this family history.
And the Percy line continues. But the dates of death and the sources are telling.
Very telling. Hotspur's son, Henry de Percy, Gen 23, 2nd Earl, killed at St. Albans, 1455.
And his son, Sir Henry de Percy, Gen 24, 3rd Earl, killed at Towton Field, 1461.
Those are major battles right at the start of the Wars of the Roses. This family was right in the thick of that conflict.
From the Percys, the line goes via Lady Margaret de Percy, Gen 25, marrying Sir William Gascoigne.
Then Lady Elizabeth Gascoigne, Gen 26, marrying Sir George Talboys.
And their daughter, Lady Anne Talboys, Gen 27, marries Sir Edward de Moke. And the sources highlight something special about him.
Sheriff of Lincolnshire, yes, but also champion to Queen Elizabeth.
The Queen's champion. That connects to the Dymoke family's traditional role, right?
Exactly. The hereditary champion who'd ride into the coronation banquet in full armor and challenge anyone who disputed the monarch's right. A unique, ancient ceremonial role tied right into this lineage.
That is such a cool, specific connection, like something out of a storybook.
It really is. The line then goes through Lady Frances Dymoke, Gen 28, marrying Sir Thomas Windebank.
And Lady Mildred Windebank, Gen 29, who married Robert Reade, Esquire, Armiger.
And these generations are sort of bridging the gap from high nobility down through the gentry, setting the stage for a huge geographical jump.
Right, to Colonel George Reade, Esquire, Armiger, Generation 30, born in England 1608. But he crosses the Atlantic, comes to Virginia around 1637.
And he's not just some settler. The sources show he became a major player in the Virginia colony very quickly.
Secretary of State, acting governor, member of the council.
Yeah.
These are big roles in early Virginia.
Absolutely crucial administrative and political positions. He was right at the center of colonial governance.
And his marriage connects him to another prominent colonial family, Elizabeth Marceau. Her father, Nicholas Marceau, was a key French Huguenot leader there.
Right. And the sources confirm George Reade's status before he left England, his right to bear arms.
Authenticated by the College of Arms in England, and noted by the New England Genealogical Society, so he was established gentry.
Exactly. An armiger, entitled to a coat of arms, confirms his social standing before making the leap to the New World.
So Colonel George Reade establishes this foothold in 17th century Virginia, and the family continues its journey across America for another 14 generations.
Yes, the sources trace it right down. From Virginia connects to other key colonial families like the Warners.
Mildred Reade married Colonel Augustine Warner Jr., Speaker of the Virginia House of Burgesses.
And the Lewises. Then the line starts spreading out dramatically.
Yeah, rather than list every name, it's the pattern that's striking, seeing how the family moved.
It really is. From Virginia down into North Carolina, then Tennessee.
And further south, Mississippi, Alabama. Out to Texas, New Mexico.
Eventually reaching California, Oklahoma, branches even up in Ohio by generation 44 is like a miniature history of American expansion through one family line.
So let's zoom out again. Tracing this single line from an 8th century emperor all the way to people across the U.S. today. What does that tell us?
It just makes history feel different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just names and dates, it's a story. One family's path through 1,000 years of huge events.
Gorging empires, Viking raids, the Norman conquest changing England completely.
The Plantagenet ups and downs, Magna Carta, the 100 Years' War, Wars of the Roses.
The world of the nobility, with roles like the King's Champion. Then that huge decision to cross the Atlantic, build a life in colonial Virginia.
And then spreading across the American continent. It's all connected through this one thread.
And those specific anecdotes we found really bring it home. Charlemagne's coronation.
Matilda building her abbey, Henry II and Becket, John and Magna Carta.
Isabella of Angouleme's wild plot and burial. Edward I's grief for Eleanor, those tapers.
Isabella of France, the she-wolf, Harry Hotspur's rebellion, the Dymoke champion.
Colonel George Reade's verified status, his leadership roles in Virginia. These are the human moments. They make it personal.
They absolutely do. Genealogical research, digging into sources like this, makes history tangible. It shows how people, even someone like a colonial leader in Virginia, were tied into these massive events and figures stretching all the way back to Charlemagne.
It's been quite a journey tracing this line from the 8th century right up to today, all thanks to these detailed sources. Our goal was really to show how you can take dense info and find a compelling, surprising story inside.
And it really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? If one family line can take so many twists and turns over centuries, connecting figures from 1,000 years ago to people alive now, what other unexpected threads might run through our own lives, our own families, our communities? What stories are just sitting there in the sources waiting to connect us to the past?